Welcome to today's webinar in the Knowledge Miles series, part of the Lord Mayor's lectures on behalf of Professor Michael Mainelli, whose theme for his mayoral year is Connect to Prosper. In this free online lecture series, we address the connections in and around the square mile, which Michael likes to call the world's coffee house, and how these might help us to tackle future global challenges. I'm Professor Tim Connell, Chairman of the Gresham Society and a Fellow of Gresham College here in the City of London, and I also sit on the Court of the Stationers' Company. I'll be convening this session and moderating the questions and answers after today's lectures. So very quickly, this is today's plan, the introduction from me, the keynote presentation from Sir Adrian Smith, and then we have time for questions and answers. It's a really interesting topic today, maths for all, the importance of maths literacy. So I'm delighted to welcome Sir Adrian Smith, President of the Royal Society. Sir Adrian, firstly, can you tell us something about yourself?
Well, how far back do you want to go? I had a grandfather who was very ill and spent a lot of time in bed. And at the age of 3 or 4, I was sent to look after him. So in desperation to find something for me to do, he taught me numbers. So I went to school fluent in percentages and decimals, and that has corrupted my life ever since. I spent 30 years as a jobbing research academic in mathematics and statistics and probability. I've had many years running universities. I spent a few years in government as Director General for Science and Research, overseeing funding and policy for science. I spent 5 years as Director of the Alan Turing Institute, trying to make sense of AI. And as you said, I'm 2/3 of the way through my stint as President of the Royal Society. In between all this, I have done a couple of reports for government on trying to change the way we organise maths education. Only partially successful, so I'm at it again today.
Well, that's excellent. So, Sir Adrian, can you tell us more about the idea of maths for all and why numerical literacy should be so important?
I'll have a go. As you've mentioned, the Lord Mayor's lecture series keeps harking back to the role of the square mile as the world's coffee house. I would like to suggest that math should overtake coffee as the main subject of conversation in the square mile. It's a language, of course, very familiar to those who work in the City of London. So I suspect I don't need to convince those who do how important it is to have a mathematically literate population, both to produce experts but also to produce a well-informed public who can engage on the issues of the day. Roughly 1/3 of maths graduates work in finance or IT, and I dare say they are getting well rewarded for it. But mathematical and data science are featuring increasingly in all sectors and in all of our lives. They increasingly support thinking and decisions in industry, finance, business, and in academic research across all disciplines. So mathematics in its broadest sense, and I'll come back to this, increasingly influences the day-to-day lives of individuals as employees, as citizens, and consumers of information. I mentioned the mathematicians who work in the city, but a growing proportion of all jobs require specific maths and data science skills. And a growing proportion of all areas and at all levels of employment require the ability to understand the world of data and feel confident to engage with it. It's obvious that the financial services sector will rely on maths and data skills, but algorithms are everywhere. A recent report from UK Research and Innovation highlighted how companies use statistics to plan and to manage risk. Operational research is used to streamline operations, reduce costs, improve productivity, and government statistics underpin effective evidence-based decision-making. Brackets, we hope. This year, the Royal Society elected a fellow who graduated, who started off with computer science and mathematics degree, but he went on to win an Emmy Award for his motion tracking technique used in video special effects. So mathematics is everywhere. And also in sports. data has revolutionized the way that games and performance is understood. As a nation, we want to move away from manual and low-skilled jobs towards jobs requiring higher levels of expertise, including technical expertise, problem-solving skills, many of which are, in its broader sense, mathematical in nature and require data skills. To do that, subject to my talk today, we have to up our game on maths and data education. Not just about jobs, it's also about being an engaged citizen with agency to participate responsibly and with discernment. In a world increasingly blighted by misinformation, people need to be able to see through that misinformation, and that often, if not always, requires data literacy. The substantial increase in the use and availability of data through digital technologies means that this issue and the way to influence it can only become ever more important. Dare I say it, with elections happening all over the world, it's important to understand the case being put forward by political parties and how they're using data to target us. So, all that by way of background. There is some good news for maths and data education in the UK. Maths A-levels are on the increase, and it is the most popular A-level, with students recognising its importance and its value for future prospects. That's in England, Wales. In Scotland, of course, they have a different system, but maths is the most popular advanced higher and the second most popular higher. And we can also celebrate the UK's many outstanding mathematicians, whether they're in universities or aiding and abetting life in the city. We had a significant political moment when the current Prime Minister, current as I speak, highlighted the need for more maths education, with maths to 18 for all as part of his advanced British standard proposals. This was, of course, last year, and even a week, as we all know, is a long time in politics. But education has to be central to the UK's long-term prospects, and as such, should be central to the offerings of the parties. We hear a lot about widespread recognition of the need for reform of the NHS, where, by the way, the key to success will be data, but not so much about education, the other great pillar of our society. The A-level system, a system that basically forces young people in England, Wales and Northern Ireland into narrowing their choices about their education at the age of 16, was introduced in 1951. Maybe we can all agree a lot has changed since then. The A-level system has not kept up. It is one of the narrowest education systems in the world, 16 to 18, and is not fit for purpose. It serves some well, let's be clear, it serves some very well, but leaves all too many behind. How can the UK hope to compete economically in a data-driven world when our education system encourages so many people to give up on maths and data literacy at the age of 16? If you take out those currently doing GCSE resits, more than 2/3 of young people in England give up on all forms of maths at the age of 16. Picture is similar in Wales and Northern Ireland. In Scotland, with a broad curriculum, 86% of those taking 5 or more highers, equivalent to 3 A-levels, choose maths, and half of all students go on to engage with maths beyond the basic level. Overall, we have poor adult numeracy, poor engagement, low GCSE success, and many young people giving up all maths at 16. So in the kind of words of the sort of school report I used to get, we could do better, and we must do better. Many people have made comparisons between this election and the rhetoric surrounding it and the one in 1997, which was the year of Tony Blair's education, education, education campaign, where he said nothing mattered more to the future of the prosperity of the country. Some of us still think that's true today. Given that innovation and skills are two of the most important pillars in driving whatever our future economic growth can be, it seems to some of us surprising to see how little substantive debate there has been in the election campaign on how to improve education. On education, the Conservative manifesto contains the Prime Minister's commitment to the advanced British standard, which includes maths for all to 18. Labour have pledged a review of curriculum and assessment, which suggests they recognise the need for change. There is also talk of improving maths across nurseries and primary schools, and a commitment to continuing professional development for teachers. The Liberal Democrats have proposed a standing commission to review and broaden the curriculum. All this sounds promising, but had you noticed, none of the parties are talking about it in the context of election campaigning, which maybe makes one question what the priorities will be in office. Our education system must adapt over the coming years, with mathematics and data education being key to generating wealth, providing young people with the right skills they need for the well-paying jobs of the future. It has to be part of education for everyone at all ages. That's what we want to hear from politicians. A commitment to real reform, a commitment to an immediate formal review that really looks hard at how our education system can be made more fit for purpose. And one of the outcomes has to be a restructuring of the secondary education system to introduce a broader and more balanced range of study. Now, talk of maths from some of us, maths for all, has led to an outcry from some. They claim that if they'd been forced to do A-level maths, it would have been a disaster for them personally, etc., etc., etc. So let's be clear. No one is saying that everybody needs to do A-level maths. A-level maths, further maths, higher advanced science do a great job at producing hardcore mathematicians. And we need more of those for pure maths, for other areas of science and research that are increasingly reliant on maths, engineers, analysts, scientists. But it's not what everyone needs. Adults with good numeracy skills earn higher wages and are more likely to be employed than those who fail to master basic quantitative skills. Data records this in spades. Higher levels of achievement in mathematics are associated with higher earnings for individuals and higher productivity. And increased productivity has to be the key determinant going forward of economic growth. And dare I say it, the pandemic exposed terrible gaps in understanding data among senior policymakers. If we continue with the current education system, there's a chance that the United Kingdom will be condemned in future competition to life in the slow lane. Increasingly reliant on a narrow elite of wonderfully talented experts, often from an equally narrow social stratum, to drive the research and innovation for economic growth. The system itself, the education system, is big. There are close to 1 million people employed in the state sector in England alone. And it's often seen as a rather unstoppable, resistant to external effects to shift it, ancient, inflexible, which may of course explain why recent efforts to reform it have been rather modest and restricted to adjusting and tweaking little bits of the system. I believe we can no longer make do. We need significant reform, and I hope the next government will focus on that. The Royal Society that I have the privilege to lead at the current time is ready to help in this enterprise, and we will be publishing a report later this year that will set out a vision for the future of mathematics and data education. That vision will look to where we need to be in 20 years' time and the necessary changes, which will of course be difficult. They'll require buy-in from students, teachers, parents, and everyone else involved in the delivery of education. And we're looking at a 5 to 15-year horizon to do all this. But in the meantime, we don't have to just say, well, it's all too difficult, wait 10 years. We do have pieces of the jigsaw that are already in place, but are sadly all too often ignored. I wonder how many of those listening in today have heard of or have engaged with what we call core maths. Core maths courses were introduced 10 years ago and lead to a post-16 qualification, roughly equivalent to half an A-level, but focusing on understanding mathematics and data in their broadest sense in the real world. So a quadratic equation isn't an a and an x squared, etc., etc. It is the thing that represents trajectories and so on and so forth. And this equips students with the mathematical, statistical, and data skills they need through motivation, through real-world problems. So it's designed to meet the very substantial unmet demand. We hear it all the time from UK employers. They don't have enough quantitatively skilled people across all sectors. Now, this wonderful core maths thing is being taken currently by just 7% of students not taking A-level maths. So that leaves about 150,000 students a year with little or no maths education after the age of 16. The picture in technical and vocational education is less clear from the data, but I suspect is no better. Although there are some signs that apprenticeship programs tailored to specific business needs are including relevant math skills, who knows? Something to watch and encourage. Data from 2022 shows that less than a third of state-funded schools and colleges offer core maths, while almost 10% of local education authorities in England have no schools or colleges with core maths entries. So even if students are looking for the chance to carry on maths in a different way to A-level, they're unlikely to be able to find it. It's a postcode lottery. So whatever happened to levelling up, we have a strong tradition of universal education. So surely we should not be happy with an education system that serves a small number so well, but leaves so many behind. So improving support for and access to core maths could be a quick win, perhaps something for the government's first 100 days. But as I said, we need a dramatic, systematic reform of education, and that will not be easy. The change we seek can't be developed by limited short-term measures. They will take 5 to 15 years to implement fully, and will need investment, careful planning, design, implementation, and evaluation. And it will also need resourcing, not least to tackle the challenge of not having enough maths teachers. Across all STEM subjects, less than half the number of new teachers needed were recruited in the past year. Another challenge is providing teachers with the time they need to ensure their own ongoing professional development. There are manifesto commitments around recruiting new teachers, but again, they've not really been rigorously examined with very little debate during the election campaign. Any plan to improve teacher supply surely must be part of a broader strategy that prioritizes retention, not just recruitment. And opportunities for teacher subject focused professional development is likely to help increase retention. Getting education right is clearly not the knockabout stuff of electioneering. So change will take a long time and cannot be held hostage by short-term electoral cycle. It requires cross-party support and a willingness of government and ministers in face of difficulty to stay the course. We've occasionally seen such foresight in other areas, the government's 15-year strategy for NHS workforce development, Labour commitment to establishing an industry strategy council to try to provide consistency over time. Let me repeat that phrase, consistency of policy and resource over time. So maybe there's hope. Long-term thinking is possible and desirable. As the Lord Mayor recently reminded us, the UK has 15% of global assets under management. The City of London has the power to influence change that can tackle global challenges. To do that most effectively, the knowledge mile needs mathematical and data knowledge. To get the mathematicians and the mathematically literate minds, we need reform of the education system. So I ask all of you out there to lend your voices to those of us calling for reform. The reforms we are suggesting are radical, but we believe the rewards will repay the efforts many times over. Perhaps the lack of discussion of education during the election campaign means that everyone recognizes the need for change, but doesn't know what to do about it. So let's see if we can get a cross-party consensus emerge after the election, which will be needed to deliver large-scale reform over a long period. Seriously, the UK cannot afford to stand still in this arena. The world is changing, the pace of change is fast and accelerating. If we want the UK to thrive and people to have good, well-paying jobs, we need them to be more maths and data literate. To do that, we need reform of our education system, and the time for action is now. And you can guess that that's the end of my peroration.
Well, I think that's a very good point for us to end and start at. We're getting some wonderful questions coming in. Interesting enough, from the rather more senior end of the population. Good one starting with John Wood. Now I've moved into advanced dotage where I've forgotten much of the maths I knew. Where can I find material which will be both fun and useful when I chat to my 9-year-old grandson, whose passion is maths? And I also have to work out the playing sequence of my pensioners' croquet club. I've asked several maths professors I know with no joy. I think we'll take the 9-year-old grandson first, but the croquet club might be of interest as well.
Yeah. So rather than get involved in each individual family problem, we do have the issue, of course, not being disrespectful in any way to primary school teachers, but many primary school teachers, I don't think, would claim that mathematics or knowledge of data or even knowledge of what the mathematical jobs of the current and the future are out there. So I think we have to find ways of helping people in the education system. I don't think we fully exploit the fantastic opportunities through video, through online. We have wonderful documentaries about animals in the jungle. Why don't we have wonderful documentaries on how to map out the croquet lawn?
If I remember rightly, didn't Lewis Carroll work out something about the sequence of tennis partners? It's in that rather nice book about Lewis Carroll by Robin Wilson. Now, on to John Hunter, who is remarking that 49% of UK adults feel negatively about maths. This apparently comes from the National Numeracy Charity, but he thinks that much the most important part of money management is emotional and personal. This balance of risk and reward, the connection with life partners over a very long future time frame, and with strong elements of uncertainty. Isn't it much more important, he asks, for 16 to 18-year-olds to learn life skills rather than a technical activity, much better left to those who are good at it?
Well, if there's a casino and you send along all the 16 to 18-year-olds who've got wonderful values and are idealistic but don't understand numbers, please put them my way. Put them my way with a pack of cards. But you know, the whole thing about decision making is, you know, what are the options, what are the probabilities, what are the rewards, the utilities? Without quantification, there are very few things, I think, where it's possible to think rationally. If you want to be irrational, fine, go away, read poetry.
Yes, it's probability versus chaos theory. Now,
Or come to me with a pack of cards.
Jules Buet is raising the matter of maths at primary school, which tends to be enhanced by adults going on saying things like, I can't do maths, maths isn't for me, I'm rubbish at maths, etc. And really, adults wouldn't say the same thing about reading and writing skills.
Yeah.
How do we get around this prejudice amongst
well, this is a peculiarly UK disease. I mean, it doesn't happen in other countries. I remember being got up very early one Sunday morning for the BBC World Service last time I did something like this, and you went around, and those in France, Italy, Germany just don't understand what we're talking about. because people at dinner parties in those countries wouldn't dream of saying things like that. So where this peculiarly, is it English or UK disease comes from, I think merits serious social research.
Well, Matthew Leach getting on to refocusing now. Um, how much can be done to refocus the content of maths teaching so that it's more useful in real life, but seen as such by the children who are actually being taught? How do you
Yeah.
persuade them that it's actually useful?
Well, this is the point I was making about core maths. There are those who see beauty, truth, and goodness if you stick a formula up on the board. I don't know what percentage of the class they are, but a very substantial proportion of the class eyes will glaze over and say, "What's that got to do with me or life?" So if you take something like a quadratic equation, I mean, it's throwing a cricket ball or launching an artillery shell or a million other things. If you start from that before you get to the equation, you capture a much wider audience than if you do. So a lot of work was put into designing this core math syllabus, which actually motivates and teaches useful stuff. In terms of the curriculum in general, I mean, we are in the middle of a revolution. I mean, that we live in a digital age, and the huge explosion of data and information is actually creates new challenges, you know, both for academic disciplines and research, but in ordinary day-to-day life. How do you sift out misinformation, etc.? So data literacy is increasingly almost, I would say, forget the word maths for a minute, data literacy, I think I would put to the head of curriculum change.
Yes, I seem to recall at City University that all the undergraduates were having to take a course in quants because nobody dared call it mathematics. That's probably part of the same issue.
Yeah,
Now,
quant was a good sell. They loved quant.
now, Chris Atkin is Professor of Engineering at the University of East Anglia and is currently the chair of a working group for the Engineering Professors Council and the Royal Academy of Engineering. Now, they're looking at the mathematics required for entry to university. Now, increasingly, he says, we engineering lecturers find that those with good grades at A-level maths nevertheless struggle to apply what they've been taught to unfamiliar problems. This seems to point to good grades being achieved by pupils being trained against a limited set of examples. Aside from the problems created for higher education, surely this kind of approach leads to low levels of enjoyment for learners. But of course, they have got to get through the exams with the right grades for university. And that
Well,
seems
okay, so I I entirely recognize what you've just read out and utterly sympathize. So now, who's to blame here? And without casting stones, a lot of teaching to the test and that is basically there is a filter to get places at university. So maybe the universities should examine what they really want and how they want it, and join in this crusade to get a much broader education.
Yes, again, a City University example with actuarial science. I think even students with a grade A at A level find that there's a fair amount of specialised maths they need before they can really get into it. Now, Nicola Gunn is looking at the Welsh GCSE, which has a numeracy qualification as well as a maths one, apparently rather more applied than the straight maths, as does the International Baccalaureate at a slightly higher level. Could these be straws in the wind, do you think?
Well, I'm not totally familiar with that, but if you go back 60 years, no, 65 years to when I did O levels, as they were called, there were papers in arithmetic and algebra. And
Yes.
arithmetic was basically, 15, 16-year-old numeracy. And I do think abandoning the understanding of basic numeracy, understanding basic data, we have to shift the curriculum back. Just being smart-assed at solving an equation that you've been taught to solve 20 times doesn't really solve the problems of the world.
Well, I must admit, one of the few things I remember from what was then O-level maths was the quadratic equation and the formula for trigonometry, but I can't say either of those have helped me much in life. Clive
Have you
Bullen,
used the trigonometry in DIY plumbing? I
no, the only
never
thing
got
I
used by
ever
trigonometry.
The only thing I ever use regularly is speed equals distance over time on the M25, where given the speed you do on the M25 makes it useless. Now, Clive Bullen was very proud to have got a distinction in S-level maths many years ago, probably,
Ah,
and he comments that we need to double math skills by something like, well, how could he have taken S-level maths? He said, we need to double math skills by up by 20%. Well, if we're doubling math skills, surely that's by 50%, although I'm a linguist. Um, Now, he's surprised that people can't see that maths is actually all around us and they can't get interested in it. We seem to be coming back to this, how do you actually not only maintain the interest, but get people interested
yeah,
in the first place?
yeah. So I think the maths has not had great public relation and comms, I think. Um, of course, it's not as easy as I had the delight yesterday of an unveiling of a portrait for Sir David Attenborough at the Royal Society, and of course, all those planet and animal films. I mean, there's an immediate kind of joy there. I think we have to think much more cleverly about how to convey the importance and excitement of maths. We have to stop being so academic and get grubby in terms of our PR and our comms.
Yes, people are still worried about the question of the real world facing people, especially in a financial capacity.
Yeah.
Martin White has come with a question here, and concerned that the number of misleading messages which you might get through the financial sector cleverly exploiting information asymmetry. And he thinks this underlines this idea that if you're no good at maths, you're going to be doomed, and that's the point at which people get switched off. Again, there's a almost a negative approach to what is a possibly serious outcome. I think it's this same
Yep.
issue about getting over this negative point.
Yeah, but if you were to work at it, instead of saying if you don't understand the maths you're doomed, you might say you'd better understand the maths in order not to be doomed. But then
Clive
it's
Bullen's
our
got,
duty. Then it's our duty to present the understandable in an appropriate way. But I think the main point I was trying to make. I can't invent solutions to all problems instantly, but that we are not in a good place, and we have to do something dramatic to reform the system. Else we're going to leave a lot of people behind in a digital dangerous world.
yes, now Clive Bullen being very positive here, teaching people the rule of 72 would help them think of the benefits of investing and the dangers of borrowing. Do you think that would actually help people when handling their finances?
Well, I'm not entirely poor, and I've never mastered the rule of 72. So I don't think it's a universal necessity, but I'm sure that many have benefited from it.
Oh, right. Um, Now, what about I think the move from primary to secondary school, I mean, with the background in languages, this is a problem that we have with launching languages at a lower level and then finding it a problem for children to proceed at a higher one. And Nicholas Bailey is raising this question about engaging pupils more during primary and then on to secondary. We're worried very much about the sort of 16 to 18s, but what about the sort of measurement of progress which takes
Yeah,
place in this rather critical 10 to 13? I've got a grandson of 11 at the moment who fortunately is very keen on maths, but it's an element of the education system which we're looking at in some detail ourselves.
yeah. So I do think there's a need to really think hard about what we do to kids 11 to 14. By and large, of course, exaggerating, and it's not really universal. Primary school kids can be excited about stuff and so on. And what you don't want to do is knock that out of them 11 to 13. I mean, there's enough going on in terms of hormones and the rest. So, I think we do need to think about better transitions from primary to secondary, in addition to the 16 to 18, which I agree I was focusing on.
Yes. Sofia Liakova, predictably, is asking me about maths degrees and how they're organised in other countries, and pointing out that degrees in many European countries take 5 years, and the overall standard of mathematics in their HE degrees seems to be higher than that of ours. Have you looked at mathematics education in other European countries?
So let's separate two things. In in most other countries, there is not this divide line at 16 where the vast numbers give up, as it were, on maths and data science.
Mm.
So you have a school population which has gone through with some form of contact in this space. When you get to university, people organize things differently. Um, some, like the UK, it's typically a 3 or 4 years degree and then perhaps a 1 year master's. Um, I think anybody who's been exposed to about 5 years, 4 or 5 years in the UK system, uh, I don't think they will suffer by comparison with people coming out of, let's say, the ones I know best, European universities, and certainly wouldn't suffer in comparison with US universities. Um, then, there's the issue of PhDs and postdocs and the rest. But I think if you look at overall standing, ultimately, if you look in the research space, I mean, the UK has performed rather well at that elite end of the spectrum. A lot of what I've been saying is the great masses left behind and, maths and data illiterate, which is a national issue. But in terms of the universities, we have, several in the top rankings of universities in the world. We have quite a few. I wouldn't worry about that end of the spectrum, to be honest. I think there are more pressing issues.
Yes. Matthew Leach gleefully tells us that he's used trigonometry and do it yourself. I just wonder whether the shells fell down later. Martin White asking about maths for engineering. Now, he did an engineering degree in the 1970s. After a couple of weeks, they all had to sit a special maths paper, and those who didn't do well enough then got further maths classes for the whole of the first year. This kind of study skills element, I think, is fairly strong in universities today, but interesting for engineering. This is 50 years ago. The A-level point at entry actually wasn't enough for what was required for the degree. Do you think that it's necessary for even engineering students to carry on with their maths learning during the degree
Yeah,
course?
I think, well, I haven't been there for a while, but I did spend 10 years of my life running the maths department at Imperial College. And 32% of our teaching effort at that time was teaching engineers in other departments. And it was quite clear that whatever they had done at school was not sufficient for what was demanded of them in the engineering degrees. So we were doing a lot of additional remedial extra mathematics for engineering students. I,
Yes.
I, I
Yeah.
really don't know what the situation is today. But
No, I think study skills are a fairly well established service across universities, but I expect it varies from faculty to faculty and possibly even university to university. Um, Judith Jackson, coming back to the primary level, her grandchildren are learning estimation of length in arithmetic, and she sees that as an essential life skill for things like shopping and do it yourself again, like how long a piece of wood ought to be before you actually buy it. I suppose that's the kind of practical thing you think we ought to know more about.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm all for useful, even if not academically sound, skills. A colleague
Yes.
of mine many years ago, when I was in Nottingham, his inaugural lecture as professor of mathematics education, the title was Seven Sevens are 50. If you
Yeah.
reflect on that, you get quite a long way in life if you know those kind of shortcuts.
Well, I can only recommend my colleague, Professor Sarah Hart at Gresham College, Professor of Geometry, as we like to call it. One of her lectures is actually 2 plus 2 equals 5, and she proves how it can be done. So I can
Yeah,
recommend
you don't
that
want
to
to carry
everyone.
this to excess. Let's not get carried away here.
Um, David Hogarth is thinking that the real world can be overstated. Now, he's a maths tutor, largely at GCSE level, and he thinks it important to engage pupils to understand the basic mathematics concepts, such as what is a graph. At school, they learn too much by rote rather than understanding, and that is a connecting line connecting all places where an equation holds true. Um,
Mm.
if you explain these things properly, it does engage the pupils. Do you think there's a kind of core element of comprehension, particularly of
Yeah, well,
terminology.
what of course I wasn't speaking about was, individual teachers and teaching strategies and teaching skills. And there are good teachers and not so good teachers. And it sounds like you've got a communication from a very good teacher.
Yes, yes. Well, of course, I'm afraid I always think of that sticker on a car bumper. If you can read this, thank a teacher. And I think you say if you could still add up, then a thank a teacher. I'll put in a plug for Mr. Talbot at Simon Langton Grammar School for Boys. He actually got me through the level, including the trigonometry and Euclid. So I really didn't do too badly. Matthew Leach is protesting that his trigonometry and DIY work perfectly and the shelves are still standing up. Martin White, and now here we have an electrical engineer. He then moved on to become an actuary. It was a superb background, and I'm very grateful for the engineering degree instead of just maths. Now, that's an interesting thing I hear from careers officers and also from HR departments with recruitment in the City of London,
Yeah.
that it's the numerical skills. And engineers, people sometimes think that you need a degree in business to succeed in business, but the engineers seem to be very respected as a cohort.
Yeah, well, oversimplifying dramatically, I mean, engineering is fundamentally about problem solving. Quite a few bits of maths are about theorem proving, and they are different worlds.
Yes. Now, Rachel Beddoes is coming back to your key argument today. What is the one thing that we could all do to improve the uptake of core maths? And can you please tell our viewers whereabouts they can find more about it?
Okay, the answer to that latter bit, you'll have to chase me afterwards, Tim, and we can put something back up on the web or whatever, what the best
We will
site
do.
is. Yeah, and the first part, just remind me what the first part was.
What can we do to improve the uptake? How can we
Okay,
make people more aware?
well, you can reward me for giving this lecture by telling 10 people who have influence what I said today.
Right. I think that, and then of course you get 10 by 10, and I'm sure there's a mathematical formula for how
Well,
long it
there's
takes to take
yeah,
our
double
population.
double the grains on the rice on the chessboard, and you're there.
Oh, absolutely the one. I always think that I found not being one who gladly dropped maths at 16 and then found subsequently statistics, percentages, and averaging and how to read a spreadsheet would have been extremely useful things to have acquired at a much earlier age, but that's only a personal view, I'm afraid. Um, I'm afraid it's all the time we have for questions, so I'm sorry to those who are still sending them in, but can we have a quick look at what's actually coming up now? 27th of June, this is a really good one. Michael Mainelli as mayor is pushing this thing about clearing up space debris. Apparently there's so many bits floating around the Earth that sooner or later we won't be able to send anything further up without colliding. And I believe he's proposing a system of indemnity and insurance. So if you send your rocket up, you've got to work out some way of what to do with the bits before they come down. Very well worth watching that one because I believe it's making a lot of progress. 3rd of July, the topic of autism approaches, and I'm sure people would like to find out much more about motion tracking haptic gloves. It goes to show what's going on in the sharp edge of even the worshipful company of glovers. People so often think that livery companies are medieval organisations with dining clubs for elderly gentlemen, and here we have the worshipful glovers looking at the haptic gloves. 4th of July, sustainability, circular ecology and the circular economy, treasuring the planet's resources for the future. So I think we have something there for everybody. So let me thank firstly the audience for coming in and for supporting the Lord Mayor's lectures. We're going on till November, so do please spread the word. If you're interested in this matter of mathematics, you might look up the webinar given on the 12th of December 2023 by Quentin Nason from the educational charity Pay It Forward, though that was actually on the topic of financial literacy. And of course, we have a large number of lectures related to maths, geometry, we like to call it, on the Gresham College website. And of course, thank you very much indeed to Sir Adrian Smith, President of the Royal Society, and we're grateful to know about the state of numeracy in the country today and ways in which hopefully we can all improve it. Now, this lecture and all our lectures are recorded. They're posted on the Gresham Society website, on our YouTube channel, in case you'd like to revisit anything, and we hope to see you all again soon for another lecture in the Knowledge Mile series. And don't forget the Mayor's theme for the year, Connect to Prosper. So let's please all connect, and hopefully we will all prosper. Thank you very much indeed, Sir Adrian, and thank you to everybody else. Goodbye.